Hi Kerusso, my name is Matthew Love and I'm the preacher at the BB Church of Christ in BB, Arkansas. And I've had the privilege to work with Kerusso for the last few years, and I always love my time that I spend with all of you. I was so saddened that we couldn't have Kerusso together this year as usual, but also so thankful that we were able to be creative enough to offer this experience, even if it is online. Well, in this video, what I want to talk about with you is how you're going to set up and record yourself preaching. So this year, things are a little bit different in many ways, but one of the ways that they're different is the last day of camp. We break out into various classrooms and you preach your sermon in front of a live studio audience, in front of other students. And as you do that, someone has a camera there typically that's set up and they're recording, and so you can watch that later, see how you did, and show it to your family and all of that at a later time. Well, this year's different because you're not going to be preaching in a room full of your peers, and you are going to be the one to have to worry about how to set up and record yourself preaching. And so all I want to do in this video is think through with you how to do that, a couple of tips to do that well. A disclaimer here, I do not claim to be an expert when it comes to recording yourself preaching. However, I, like so many of my preaching colleagues, have had to be quick on our feet this year in figuring out how to preach to a camera better and not worse. And so these are just some observations I've made, or perhaps some things that I've picked up and learned over the last couple of months. Maybe more preferences than rules, but still I hope this conversation is helpful to you. So the first thing that you want to think about, of course, is how you're going to record your sermon. And the good news is that if you have a smartphone or a laptop, then you've probably got a decent enough camera to record yourself pretty well. Those cameras, especially in iPhones and smartphones, are pretty good for recording. I'm using my iPhone right now. So when you set your camera up, you want to try to set it up higher rather than lower. My camera might actually be a little low, but you want something that's about at eye level so that you're not looking too far down into the camera. If you set it on a table and you're looking down into the table, it may not be a very flattering look to have someone look down at you like that while you're preaching, and being able, having to listen to someone who's looking down on you while they're preaching. It may not be the best way to communicate your message. So somehow figure out a way to lift up your camera, set your phone on something higher, stack up some books or something like that. Get creative. The other thing that I would say with the camera itself is I prefer, when I'm preaching to a camera rather than to an audience. If I'm preaching to an audience being recorded, that's another thing. But if I'm only preaching to a camera, which I think most of you are going to be preaching to a camera, look into that camera when you preach. There's a big difference, I think, between looking at the camera like I'm doing now and looking down at the screen where I see myself maybe on my phone or my computer. I see myself preaching on this screen, and it's tempting to look there, but I think a more intimate and familiar sort of feel is achieved when I look up in that camera, right? That eye contact. You don't have to have your eyes locked there the entire sermon, but to come back to there. You can look down at yourself some, look around the room, but come back to that. Make eye contact with us who are going to be watching this. You also want to think about your lighting. Again, my camera right now is not ideal necessarily, but you want to have your face lit. That's the main thing you want to try to do is light your face enough so we can see your facial expressions. If you're preaching in front of a bright window, and we're going to get to background here in just a second, but if you're preaching in front of a bright window, you don't want to preach in front of a bright window, but you may have seen that before where once you're in front of that bright light, you can't really see the person's face. And we want to be able to see your facial expressions. So try to light up your face. So you have your camera, you have it lifted up, you're looking into it, you've got light. Use a lamp, use natural light from a window, figure out a way to let your, shine some light on your face. You also want to think about your sound. Is it going to be quiet enough where you're recording without feedback. Maybe it's an air conditioner or a TV in the background or somebody in the room next door making noise, the people on the roof that day working on the roof, okay? Try to avoid all of that so that we don't have those distractions. Also think about your background. Again, the bright window is not a great option. One of my favorite options for backgrounds is what you see behind me here. I'm in my office, in my study at my church, and I've organized my books to look like a decent enough background behind me. The reason I like books is because most of us have some books at home that we can organize, even if they're not set up like that right now. Put some time together in making your background look nice, presentable. We don't want something too busy or too distracting. We may not also want something too boring. So a blank wall is fine, but maybe there can be something a little bit more lively and inviting than just preaching in front of a blank wall. And finally, let me encourage you to think about what you're going to wear when you preach to a camera. I prefer, since it's more of an intimate setting, I'm in my office preaching to my phone, and you're going to be watching this. It's a kind of a face-to-face kind of conversation that we're having. I prefer something that's a little bit nicer than a t-shirt, but also something that's not so nice that it's kind of stuffy, like a three-piece suit and a full Windsor knot tied tie. I think something that's maybe a collared shirt that looks sharp and professional, maybe a jacket with a collared shirt with no tie, something like that. Date clothes, right? Something that looks good, but maybe not quite too fancy. Again, the goal here is not perfection. As you set up your camera, record yourself, you're not going to do this perfectly unless you have professional help to help you set this up, or professional studio. It's not going to be perfect, but we just want it to be better than maybe it could be if we didn't think it through. See, what we don't want to happen, what I don't want to happen for your sake, is that you've put together this very good sermon, a strong sermon. You've put weeks of study into this, and you're really proud of your sermon that you're going to deliver, and then you just throw open your laptop and you start recording, and there's a really messy bed in the background, or somebody's walking in the background, and there's noise that makes it hard to hear you, or we can't see your facial expressions because the lighting's not good. Don't worry about making it perfect, but we do want to be thoughtful about how you set up your camera in order to communicate your sermon most effectively. So I hope this has been helpful to you, this video. I may not have covered everything or everything perfectly, but at least have the conversation of what it's going to look like to record yourself. I and all the counselors are so excited about watching your sermon. We can't wait to see those and be able to give you feedback on them once we see them uploaded. And I also want to encourage you, once you have this sermon finished, reach out to your preacher at your church or one of your leadership there at your church and ask if you can give this devotional or this sermon there at church, or even online church if you're doing online church. But find a way to use this work that you've done there in your local community, in your local church. Because ultimately, what this camp and what this process that you've been in this summer is all aiming at is that we preach for God's glory, that we preach to build up the church. And so use your gifts and this hard work to bless them. If we can help you in any way, finishing up your sermons and uploading them or anything like that, reach out to us. And again, we're excited to see your finished product. God bless.